Hello, Airbus Cockpit Coach here. In this short video we're going to look at the use of the exterior lights on the Airbus A320 series, where they are and when we use them, and we're going to be using the Fenix A320 model to do that. Let's jump inside the cockpit and take a look at the lighting panel. So here we are in the cockpit, and on the overhead we have our exterior lights area at the front, captain side. I'll run through them all individually. So we'll start with the strobes. It has 3 positions, the bottom one being off, middle one auto, and on top there on. In the cold and dark state, the strobe switch is moved to off. Usually as part of after start checklists with or the after start flows, depending on your specific airline standard operating procedure, that usually gets moved to the auto position. The strobes are located on the edges of the wings on either side, and they're flashing bright white lights. And in the auto position, the strobes would come on as soon as the pressure is released from the wheels on takeoff. So it's a bit of a fail-safe there in case we forget it to move to the on position. We'd normally turn the strobes on entering an active runway. So as soon as we're clear to line up, we would turn the strobes to the on position, or if indeed we were crossing an active runway to get elsewhere on the airfield, for example, and then we'd turn off once we're passed. We'd keep the strobe lights on throughout flight until we land and vacate the landing runway. We'd have them off on the taxiway because they are very bright and can be blinding to other pilots and personnel on the ground. So here are the strobe lights on the edge of the wing. I've got them on either side. You see it consists of 2 bulbs. It's modelled very nicely here. There is a alternate flash between the 2 bulbs. There's a bit of a redundancy in there already, the fact we've got 2 bulbs operating. Now we do have a little blue LED in this lighting compartment that will light up once the lamps themselves, the bulbs, are reaching the end of their stated lifespan, that's the manufacturer's lifespan. So we'd log that in the maintenance logbook if we saw that, and they'll get changed out before they fail. So hopefully we never get to a position where we have mandatory lighting, which a strobe is, not operational. Next we have the beacon light. So it's just a simple off and on for the beacon. We turn the beacon on as soon as we're cleared to move or start the engines on the aircraft, whichever one comes first. So it's very much an indication of a hazard, so it lets personnel on the ground know that engines are operating or about to operate, or the aircraft is about to move. It stays on for the duration of flight until we arrive at our destination, arrive on our parking area, shut the engines down, and once the engines at a safe speed to allow the personnel to approach the aircraft, we would then turn the beacon off. So the beacon stays on for the duration of flight. The beacon lights are these red flashing lights. We have 2 of them. This one is below the fuselage, and the other is located on top of the fuselage. So they can be visible 360 degrees, so the aircraft's fully visible from below and above with the beacon lights on. So next we have the wing lights. It's a simple off and on for the wing lights. The use of wing lights does vary greatly depending on where you are in the world, actually. So over in the United States, for example, I know they use the wing lights a lot more than we do over here in Europe. But it's very much dependent on standard operating procedure. There's never really a time where you can't use the wing lights. Very useful for lighting up the leading edges of the wing and the front of the engine cowling, so you can look for icing, for example. So we can take a look out the window and see that at night, see what's happening with our wings or engines. Also very good at just making the aircraft more noticeable at night or in low visibility, and sometimes even on pushback on the stand. A particular dark area of the airport, it helps light up the area around us a little bit more. So different uses, and but yeah, they've got their place, and it's very much dependent on standard operating procedures and pilot preference as to when we use the wing lights. So here you can see the wing light on the forward fuselage, which shines out along the leading edge of the wing on either side of the aircraft. and also the front of the engine. You can see how it lights up the apron area here as well. So they're very powerful lights, and there was a safety bulletin issued a little while ago with these. So if they do get very hot, so if you do connect an air bridge or jetway to the aircraft, you need to make sure that it's not coming in contact with the light, because it has caused a fire, I believe. So just one to be aware of. Next we have our navigation and logo lights. There's 3 positions for this switch, with off, 1 and 2. Cold and dark state, you'd have the switch in off. As soon as us as crew come onto the aircraft and start powering it up, we should move this position to on, either 1 or 2. So what there is, there's 2 different circuits. So in each of the navigation light housings there's 2 bulbs. So should we have a failure with one of the bulbs, we can switch to the secondary circuit and light up the alternate bulb. So we can still operate, as these are mandatory lights. We cannot dispatch without the navigation lights functioning. The logo lights linked, so the logo will illuminate and essentially until we retract gear on departure. Then it remains off for the flight, and then on final approach, when we drop the gear, the logo light will illuminate again and stay on the ground. Not only for advertising reasons, lighting up the tail, but also it makes the aircraft that little bit more visual. So this is the port side or left side navigation lights, which is red, and you can see inside here there are 2 bulbs. So if we were to turn on the secondary circuit using the switch in the cockpit on the overhead, this bulb would illuminate instead of this bulb. So there's that redundancy there. Starboard side navigation light is green, and they're very useful in determining the direction an aircraft is travelling at night. So if you do see an aircraft in the sky and you see a green light on the left and a red light on the right, you know that aircraft is coming towards you. The logo lights are located on the rear elevator and shine up onto the tail on either side. Also linked to the navigation lights in the rear tail cone, just below the APU exhaust, is a steady white light, so the aircraft can be seen from the rear. Again, it's a dual circuit and operates on the secondary circuit on the navigation lights, so should this light have failed, we can switch over to the other circuit. Next we have our runway turn-off lights. So these are located in the nose wheel, and they extend at a wider angle than the actual nose wheel taxi light, lighting up the edges of the runway or the taxiway if needed. And we generally put these on on takeoff. They usually come on with the strobes as we enter the runway, and we'd usually turn them off after takeoff on the selection of flaps 0 as part of our flows. Once the wheels retract, regardless of switch position, the lights will turn off. So here we are looking at the nose wheel. These lower lights here are the turn off lights. Here we are now located behind the nose wheel, looking forward, and you can see the effect of those lights and the angle they shine outwards at. We would also use the runway turn-off lights in low visibility when taxiing to help us navigate along the taxiways and seeing where the edges are. Next we have our landing lights. Now these aren't just used for landing, they're also used on takeoff, and they have 3 positions. So at the moment they're in the retracted position. We have landing lights located on the inner side of the left wing and the right wing. And these drop down on this particular model, so we can then move into off position. The landing lights will drop out of the wing and face forward, but will not light up, so I can show you that now. Here's our landing lights located just near the main gear doors, and these are on either side. Drop down in the off position. They do act as a little bit of a speed brake, so they do provide obviously some drag. So with these down, you'll get an increase in descent rate, usually around about 100 feet per minute if you drop these. Also, there's a fuel penalty if you leave them out. They can be left out. There's not an operating limit on them, but you will have a penalty on fuel of around 1%. So we keep these in the retracted position until we reach our departure runway, at which point we would usually drop the lights but keep them off, Once we're on the runway and cleared for takeoff, depending on standard operating procedures with your particular operator, these are usually moved to on takeoff clearance. On climb out, again there's some variation now on standard operating procedures. With my operator, we can turn them off after takeoff when we like, essentially. The rule out there that was prior to that was at 10,000 feet you would turn them off and retract. And coming back into to land, you turn them on at 10,000 feet and keep them on until vacating the runway after landing. And here's the front-looking view of our aircraft with both of those landing lights on. You can see they provide very good forward illumination. Lastly, we have our nose wheel light switch, which has 3 positions: off, taxi, and takeoff. When the aircraft is not moving, we would have the nose wheel lights to off. The nose wheel lighting system essentially consists of 2 lights, one larger, one slightly smaller. So the smaller one we use for taxiing. So whenever we're clear to taxi, we would turn that to the taxi position, moving around the airfield. It's quite normal these days that when we are instructed to give way to another aircraft, for example, and hold at a particular point, we would turn that off just so the other crew can recognise that we've acknowledged and received that instruction. And once we're cleared to move again, we'd turn it back on the taxi roll. Once we're cleared to take off, we would move this switch to the takeoff position with the turn-offs. So they'll come on and the strobes together and the landing lights. And this is a slightly larger light on the nose wheel, which provides further forward illumination, helping us to see the centre line. Again, the takeoff position on the nose light would come off on a selection of flap 0. But in any case, retracting the gear would cause the lights to turn off. On approach, we would select the nose wheel lights to the takeoff position on gear down. Once we vacate the runway after landing, we would select the nose wheel light to the middle position for taxi and movement around the airfield. Heading on to stand, so we don't blind the crew on the ground, we'd normally turn the taxi light to the off position before turning on to stand. So here we are at the nose wheel. We have the 2 lights at the top, which are linked to the nose wheel lighting system. The smaller one is the taxi light, and the larger one is the light used for takeoff. In case you're wondering what the little red light here is, that indicates that the parking and brake is set, which is monitored by the ground crew. So this is our forward view from behind the nose wheel with the taxi lights only on. And this is the same position with both the taxi and takeoff light on, so it's a greater intensity of illumination straight forward of the aircraft. A quick recap then. Strobes, cold and dark, will be in the off position, usually auto as part of after start checks. Whenever entering an active runway or crossing an active runway, throughout flight until landing and leaving an active runway, the strobe should be in the on position. The beacon should be on whenever the aircraft is expected to move or the engines start, engines operating until the aircraft comes to a standstill and the engines are shut down. And that includes under tow as well. Wing lights, again probably the most flexible of all of them, I guess, in terms of use. It comes down to standard operating procedures. Great for providing greater visibility of the aircraft out there in low visibility procedures when they're in operation, and lighting up the leading edges and the engine cowling, looking for ice. Navigation lights are mandatory. 2 different circuits. Off in the cold and dark state. As soon as we enter and power up the aircraft, we'd have them on. We usually alternate depending on who's flying, so if captain's flying them in position 1, if the first officer's flying position 2, so they get alternate use. But they stay on throughout the flights until powering down the aircraft. The runway turn-off lights can be used for low visibility operations when taxiing, but generally we would turn these on when clear for takeoff to provide better visibility of the edge of the runway. We'd turn them off on selection of flap 0 after departure part of our flows, and on again on selection of gear down on approach until vacating the runway after landing. Landing lights off for taxi. We'd drop them just before takeoff. As soon as we're clear for takeoff, we turn them on On climb, depending on standard operating procedures, we can either turn them off when we feel that's required, or at 10,000 feet. And then on landing, we'll turn them on again, passing 10,000 feet descending until vacating the runway after landing, at which point we'll turn those off and retract. The nose wheel light should be off whenever stationary. Whenever the aircraft starts to move, we clear to taxi, we turn that on. If we have to give way, we turn it off again, and then back on once we're cleared. Once we're clear for takeoff, nose wheel light goes to takeoff and is turned off on selection of flap 0 as part of our blows after takeoff. It will come on again on approach, on selection of gear down, back to the takeoff position, and then once we vacate the runway, we'll move it to the taxi position. We normally turn it off before entering stand so we don't blind the ground crew waiting to greet us. So that's the exterior lights. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions on that, please drop them in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with the latest content. Thanks for watching.